Of course, with the good, you're going to have the bad days.
Oh.
Here's the worst. Has anybody heard of the Coal Creek train wreck? Ah, well, let me enlighten you. I wrote the book. The Coal Creek train wreck is Wyoming's worst passenger rail disaster ever. You would think the Union Pacific had a worse wreck? Nope, it happened just between Casper and Glen Rock.
And then the next thing I would like to do is present Con this little thank you for coming over here from Casper. Thank you, thank you. We have some chips. We have a Snickers. And then Lucas Keeler has written a book. It's not here yet. It's called The Outlaws of Red Butte. And so I will be mailing that to Con.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. And he also got a magnet too. All right, everybody, he's back. And I know he was a great presenter. Here's Con Trumbull.
Hey, my voice isn't what it normally is, but can everybody hear me?
What?
Okay, good. I'm not going to be tied down. Sorry to sound a little raspy. The flu went through the ranch last week, and my voice is still catching up. So we'll see how this goes here. Let's see, lights. Probably be a good idea.
Sorry.
Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. Thank you guys for coming out. I did not expect this turnout when I was driving up today. Very kind of nasty day in Casper. It was down in the 40s this morning with like 40-mile-an-hour winds with gusts to 70. So this is nice up here, and I'm so glad you guys came out.
Glad you didn't blow you off the road.
Yeah. If you don't know me, my name is Con. I'm actually partially from Newcastle. I claim this as my hometown instead of Casper. My dad is from here. In fact, my family's right over here. We are Adkins and Podios. This is kind of my hometown. This is my hometown school. I went to kindergarten here, just down the hall, and Becky went to kindergarten with me, right in this room, and so this is really kind of a homecoming, and more so than that, this is the town where I really found my love of railroading and mining. My family came over from Poland to work at Cambria, and so growing up, I always heard stories about the Cambria mine and everything that happened there, the trip over, everything like that. Watching the trains roll through town was one of my favorite things when I was a kid, and so that really set me up on a love of mining and railroading that carries on to this day. That took me to college to get a geology degree. I worked for the federal government for almost 10 years in coal mining. I was a production and mine planning inspector in the Powder River Basin, all the way through Wyoming and then up into Montana and North Dakota, of all places. I hated that. Not so much the mining part, I hated working for the government. Absolutely hated it. And so I left the government. I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm at the ranch. I had been volunteering for this little steam railroad in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, and the guy in charge of the railroad calls me and says, "Hey, do you want a job?" And I said, "Mark, I cannot move to Nevada. I have this ranch. I can't leave." And he says, "I'm going to make it work. And so if you want to work for us, you can work from home, you can come down here." And I went on that journey, and now I'm one of the few qualified steam locomotive engineers in the state of Wyoming. I actually run these things for a living, which makes that kind of fun. Is anybody here railroaders at all?
Well,
Oh man, you guys are
model
gonna have to check
railroaders.
me. Fact checks. We'll see if I can say everything right. So that's kind of where I come from, and that's where my love of this has all come from. Being in Casper, of course, my specialty is Central Wyoming. And so today we're going to talk about Central Wyoming railroads in particular, which is a little far from you. However, the railroads of Central Wyoming really affect the development of the entire state of Wyoming. Railroads go back to the start of the Transcontinental Railroad working across what's now southern Wyoming. The rest of the state's fairly late coming. We were very slow to get settled up here in the rest of the state, but the railroads do start to expand. And I was going to add some stuff on railroads up here in this region, Of course, the Black Hills have fascinating railroad history, but I've been a little busy, and so preview of coming attractions one of these days. We'll come back and do that again. So a lot of what I'm going to show you in this program to make this a little bit even more special are photographs that have never before been seen by the public. I got access to a couple really good private collections in Casper, and so a lot of these photos nobody's seen before. So that makes this a little special for you guys. We're going to start off our journey right here. It is June 15th, 1888, down in Casper. This is the very first train into Casper.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. I'll try to stay out of your way. This is the very first train into Casper. It's a 440 steam locomotive owned by the Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley Railroad, which is a subsidiary of the Chicago and Northwestern. That railroad follows up the North Platte River. Like everything else in Casper's history, the Oregon Trail came up the North Platte River. The Mormon Trail came up the North Platte River. The Pony Express came up the North Platte River. The railroad came up the North Platte River. It's a very common theme in central Wyoming when you look at the migration patterns. They get to Casper, and the dream is to create another transcontinental railroad that will provide some competition to the mighty Union Pacific. And so the Chicago Northwestern has mighty dreams. They get to Casper in 1888. Casper is incorporated in April 1889, and then they decide to push on to the west. These are part of these never before seen photos, and these ones I actually found of all places on eBay. I have a search thing, and it pings me one day, and it says, "Hey, railroad album, Central Wyoming." This album was full of photos that are very, very unique. This is the actual surveyor's life. The surveyor that had this, I'm not quite sure of his name right now, trying to track that down. He doesn't say, he just says me. So I'm trying to match faces in the pictures that are labeled to see if I can get his name right. But he took a camera with him. They left down in Valentine, Nebraska in 1906, and they work in 1906 and 1907 from Valentine, Nebraska up to Lander and beyond, laying out the route that the Chicago Northwestern is going to take. This is one of his fellow surveyors there. That's their transit that they're using. They're working along. They're living in that boxcar. That's a bunk car for the survey crew, and then a picture up top inside one of those bunk cars. As they're doing that, they're laying out a route. It's fairly simple. Have any of us driven to Shoshone from Casper?
Yeah, that's pretty boring.
Hands down, the worst highway in the state of Wyoming. I have to say, I used to do it all the time. Absolutely hate that road. But it's a great place to build a railroad. There's not a lot that's in your way going up that route. And so they actually have a fairly easy time of that. They're going along. That's one of the construction trains down there on the bottom. They would load it up with supplies, push it out along. The surveyors would lay out the route. Then there'd be a grading team. They're going to grade the roadbed down. Then come the track layers, laying the ties, then laying out the rails, then coming along with the spike mauls and driving those in. I have been railroading for a decade, and I am very proud of the fact I have never driven a spike. My boss keeps telling me that's going to change. So I don't think so. One of the things they had to do up there on the top is build bridges. And so these are some of the wooden pile bridges that they were building near Riverton. They had steam donkeys. They'd move those out. They'd pile drive these big, big poles in there and then build a bridge across. When they did that, they were looking at speed, not necessarily longevity of the bridges. And so in the next few years after they lay the rail down in 1907, they have to go back there and replace a lot of those bridges with more permanent structures. But this got them to Lander. And they head all the way up there. And in 1906, the very first passenger train leaves Casper to go to Lander. This is the first passenger train on the return trip to Casper. It's in Shoshone. Gosh, look at that station. They were something in 1906. This was a big event. Whenever you had the first train, it was never the first train. The first trains were the construction trains. So people had been seeing trains going through for weeks at this point, going all the way to Lander. But this was the first official train of the railroad. you couldn't buy a ticket on. The people that are getting on this train are all of the local politicians. They're the business owners. They're the newspaper people who are all invited along for this special trip. And you can see just how fancy this was, especially with the little girl with her nice, clean white dress right next to her. But this was a big event for them. And so Lander now is the terminus of the Chicago Northwestern, and they have big plans. We are going to go past that. The survey crew goes towards Du Bois. They go past Brooks Lake, which is named for our great-great-grandfather, B.B. Brooks. They're looking at where that rail line is going to go, and then the Chicago Northwestern cuts a deal with the Union Pacific. They decide they're not going to keep building. And so Lander, which was supposed to be a stop along the way, becomes the westernmost terminus of the Chicago Northwestern, and it gains the moniker where the rails end and the trails begin. And so that's where Lander is kind of left hanging for a while. As far as Casper, they had two depots. The one on the right is the Chicago Northwestern Depot. It was considered the finest depot on the line west of Omaha. It had steam heat. It had hot and cold running water and tile floors and nice spacious waiting rooms. They spared no expense on this because this is going to be a very important route across the continent, which it doesn't become. On the flip side, the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy also comes to town. They reach Casper in 1913. However, they are going to do something completely different from everybody else that settles central Wyoming. Everybody else, including my family, travels up the North Platte River and gets to central Wyoming. They're not going to do that. They start building south from Montana. They head down, they hit Thermopolis first, have to build through the Wind River Canyon, and then make their way down to Casper, arriving there in 1913, pushing on down to Douglas, just past there to Orange Junction, where they connect in with the Colorado and Southern. And so the Burlington comes in a completely different direction from everybody else. But they too also build one of the finest depots on that system. The Burlington depot cost them about $85,000 when they built it in 1916. It had beautiful waiting rooms on the ground floor, baggage office, mail offices, express offices, a dining room. The upstairs had all of the railroad offices in it. They spared no expense. That building has been in continuous use by the railroad to today. It's still used today. I did get a chance to go in it very briefly. Nothing like it was. It's got all of the charm of a government office. They basically gutted it, and it has cubicles, which is a real shame.
Too bad.
It's really too bad.
Okay, I've got a good question for you.
Yeah.
Okay, like from Casper to Shoshone, and then that was the end of the rail line, or?
So the Northwestern goes to Lander from Shoshone, and then the Burlington heads up to Montana.
Okay, and then, okay, like from Casper to Shoshone, was there a place where that train could turn around and go back to Casper?
They did. Arminto was the big turnaround point. They had a big Y there. So they ran, we'll see some pictures here in a bit, but they ran special steam excursions from Casper to Arminto, turned around, and came back to town. And they had a couple other points along the way to turn things around, but mostly the Burlington was just going clear to Montana and back. They'd run right through. This is the Burlington Yards in Casper about 1929. The man that took this photo was a man named Tom Cole. Tom Cole was a young boy who grew up around the railroad in Casper. His family worked for the railroad. He was going to work for the railroad. And Tom Cole is a character. He liked to climb. And he liked to climb things that were really, really tall. He is, in this case, climbing the radio tower for the Ohio Oil Company, about 160 feet in the air. He also climbed the 200-foot tall power plant smokestack and would do handstands on the very top.
In addition to the weekly printed version of the newsletter journal, we also promote our community and share important information on our award-winning website, newslj.com, and in our weekly email newsletter, Nuke Now. We also connect with readers through various social media platforms and invite you to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can even take a look at a recent meeting of the City Council, School Board, or County Commission on our YouTube channel. We do hope that you will go to newslj.com and subscribe today, and we look forward to making all of our great content available to you. But regardless of your level of support, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for doing your part to preserve a free and independent local press.
He also climbed the 200-foot tall power plant smokestack and would do handstands on the very top.
Oh my gosh.
He went to the edge of Fremont Canyon along the North Platte River and did handstands on the edge of the canyon. He goes to Pathfinder Dam and does handstands on the edge of Pathfinder Dam with that big drop, not the water side, the cliff side. So he's kind of a character. He becomes a clerk in the master mechanic's office in the roundhouses in Casper. The other thing that he does, being a clerk, he's very interested in information. He starts keeping a diary. He keeps track of everything that happens on the railroad. When people hired on, when they retired, when the first train got here, when the last train left, when they first got diesels, when there was this accident, that accident. If you're a historian, you dream about this stuff. And that diary has existed. He made photocopies and sent it to all sorts of people. So we actually know quite a bit about the railroad in Casper thanks to Tom's diary. In this case, he climbed up this radio tower and he's looking across at the roundhouse. So the roundhouse is right there in the center. Let's see if I can get my pointer here. Oh, look right there. There's the Casper roundhouse. Here's some water tanks. There's a bunch of oil tanks over here. This is the power plant, and this is that 200-foot tall smokestack that he'd do a handstand right on the top of.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
That roundhouse seems big even for today's
Oh, it's
standard
huge.
in Wyoming.
Yeah, this is
How
one of
many
the biggest in the
bays are
state.
in there?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but at the time, this is one of the biggest roundhouses in the state of Wyoming, outside of Cheyenne and Evanston, as far as I know.
That thing's huge.
Down here is Center Street. How many of us have been to Casper? How many of us have driven down Center Street? Did you know Casper's first courthouse was in the middle of Center Street? It was just down on the other side of this crossing on that side of the photo, and it was right in the middle. It looked very much like yours here in town. Somebody decided that the prosperous region of North Casper needed better access, and that the courthouse was interrupting the flow of traffic. And so they tore down that courthouse and replaced it with the 1940s one that we have today. How many of us have ventured into North Casper? Not the place to go, right? So that never really panned out. However, in 1929, all of those houses in the background are the railroad workers' houses. That's a company town back there. That's where all the families live. The main line of the railroad is the track right here. It goes up to the depot. The depot's right over there. These are your yard tracks where they could take apart and put together freight trains. And then right here is a crossing shanty. They had a conductor who got injured in a wreck. And this is one of the ways that the railroads might take care of you. If you were somebody that gave really good service to the company, they made sure to take care of you. He's injured in a wreck. He can't get a doctor's note to go back to work. The railroad says, well, we could fire you. You can't work for us. Instead, if you can climb those steps, you can be the crossing guard. And so this former conductor spent many, many years up there lowering the gates and raising the gates for the traffic going back and forth on Center Street.
Wow, cool.
Is it still there? Oh, yeah.
Nope, it's gone. They have replaced that.
All around.
So that whole crossing is gone. They've put that underpass on Center Street right where that crossing used to be. The roundhouse is gone. We're going to see pictures of the last of it coming down. The smokestack got toppled in the 60s. Tom called that his Waterloo. He was very upset when it came down. And most of the yard tracks are all gone. The Burlington yard that you see today is just a shadow of its former self. They used to have tracks branching off all across town where people could go into industries. And this is only one of 2 yards in Casper. The Northwestern has a completely separate yard, and they're serving the oil industry mostly. However, the Chicago Northwestern, one of the guys that I talked to is a former Burlington guy. He calls it the cardboard and no wheels, and cheap and nothing wasted railroad. He said their track was horrible even while they were still operating. This is one of the passenger trains that went through Casper. Casper was a very busy passenger line. A lot of people traveled from Billings down to Denver on trains 29 and 30. There was also a train that took you to Alliance, Nebraska and points beyond there. The Burlington Depot sees a lot of traffic through it. The Northwestern Depot also has passenger trains, although they're never as popular as the Burlington trains. The Burlington train is more popular because it's got Pullman service. Did anybody ever get to ride in a Pullman car? Oh, those were the days, weren't they? If you never got to do that, you're missing out. There will never again be Pullman service on the rails like you saw at that point as far as public transportation goes. You can get really good service on private cars and stuff, but that was riding really good as a member of the traveling public. They had all sorts of people coming in and out of town on the train. Traveling salesmen, people coming to work, immigrants, politicians. We're going to see some photos. Teddy Roosevelt comes in on the train. FDR comes in on the train, Truman comes in on the train, and royalty comes in on the train and visits Central Wyoming. And so this is really the connection to the outside world. When they replaced the steam locomotive, they switched to streamlined diesels, but they still were very, very, very proud of their job. The image on the left is about 1960, and on the right is August of 1967. Right up until the end, Central Wyoming's passenger crews made sure you had your individual headrest sheet thing to make sure that it was clean. You had fresh drinking water. They took care of you. They were dressed to the nines in their conductor's uniform right up till the end of operations. The last passenger train to leave town would be September 2nd, 1967. And up there is Conductor Arneson. He was the last passenger conductor to leave Casper. There's the engine crew swapping for the very last time. The man that gave me these photos is a man named Chuck Eckerson. If you've ever spent time around Casper, you may have heard of Chuck. Most people go, who is that? And I say, he's the man with the tiny train around his house on 13th Street. So if you've ever been in Casper and heard of the guy with the tiny train, that's Chuck. He worked for the Burlington for over 40 years. And he still is, a bit of a romantic. For being a guy that uses the F word like it's air, he's got a romantic side to him. He knew how important this was. He knew what a monumental thing this was, and the railroad made no big deal about it. They didn't want people to make a big deal about the passenger train being canceled. And so he goes down with his camera on his day off, he takes these pictures for us, and he gets a photo of the very last passenger boarding the passenger train in Casper. He goes to the end of the train, he writes the end, 9/2/67. What does he say there? Goodbye forever, 29, C.W. Eckerson. And then he cried.
Wow.
He's kind of a funny guy. He has the marker lights off of that passenger car. He saved those.
Oh, really?
And as the train leaves town, Conductor Arneson sees him along the platform and picks up that step box that she's on and throws it off the train to him. So that still exists in Casper. We just did a special exhibit a couple years ago. We borrowed his uniform. We borrowed the step box. And we had it all there, and we had him come down and take a picture next to it, and he walked in and just started crying. I said, I'm sorry, Chuck, just the memories, they're so good. I said, well, thank you for sharing. So a lot of the stories I get are from him, which is very fortunate to have, really. Casper also was part of the infamous Blizzard of 49. How many of us were in the Blizzard of 49? Remember the cool, cold, cold days? Yeah, I do too. Maybe not. In my dreams, I do.
Trying to travel, go to California, and the trains were all stranded.
Yeah.
Over there in Casper, and so was the highway.
Yep, this is a train trapped.
Yep.
Right over there on the right, all covered in snow, is a cold steam locomotive that got trapped outside of Casper. If you look, there's an army plane there, and they're dropping boxes, and there's the shadowy forms of the train crew running to get them before they're buried by snow again. I've got letters from a man named Mr. Grissinger, who was the superintendent of the Casper Division, and he was talking in his letter about when the blizzard of '49 hit, they had to get the line open. And so the Burlington boys and the Northwestern boys, who are on tracks that can see each other, decide to race. And so they load up the private car from the master mechanic full of supplies. They put the plow on the front. The Northwestern boys are over there, and they leave town in a race. And they're blowing through drifts, and there goes the Northwestern boys off the track.
Oh.
And so the Burlington boys go, well, hold up. We better slow down. And so they slowed down. They cleared the line. They didn't run off the track. But they talk about how trapped the trains were and how long it took them to blow through all of those drifts. That wasn't the last time. Of course, Casper is well known for its wind. The drifts continue today. And we have really great pictures of diesel locomotives that come in, and you don't know how the engineer could even see out of the cab because the front is so piled high with snow. It got to a point where they had to bring rotary plows. So out here in the west, down in the flat grounds, we don't really know what rotary plows are. We had wedge snow plows, just like a highway plow going down the tracks. Rotary plows are really kind of fun. They're a steam engine inside a body that turn giant blades on the front and cut through the snow like a snowblower and throw the snow off the track. The drifts would get so deep that the wedge plows couldn't get through, and they would have to call in rotary plows to clear the track, which they said was quite the sight to see. One of Wyoming's biggest industries is, outside of oil,
Coal.
okay, common to the entire state, I mean.
Beef.
Livestock, agriculture.
Oh, sorry.
That is probably Wyoming's most common industry. We all have our own little things, but everybody has agriculture in common in the state of Wyoming. Up there on the top is kind of a fun picture. Back in the background is Banner Mountain, which is right there. My house is right at the base of that canyon. These are B.B. Brooks Company wool sacks headed to town. Big wool country. They would shear them, they'd put these sacks on the wagons, and they'd haul those into town. They'd take them down. On the very bottom left are the wool warehouses in Casper. They shipped a lot of wool by rail out of there. For our family, we did that up until World War II. We would ship it all out down to Denver. It would go to market. World War II ends, and the market crashes. We had 3 entire warehouses full of wool in Denver that we couldn't sell. And they sat in the warehouses, I'm told, for 2 or 3 years before they finally got through the wool. That was the end of the sheep business for my family, and I'm glad we've never looked back. Not a sheep guy. But we do beef cows. The other thing that came out of Casper and indeed around the state was the livestock. You had to go to the big packing plants. Where were the big packing plants in the United States in the early 1900s? Omaha. Kansas City. Where's the jungle set? You didn't have to read the jungle? Chicago. I had to read the jungle in school. How did you get out of it? You had to take your livestock to market. The railroad would take your livestock on trains, but they would not take care of your livestock for you. You, as the rancher, had to send representatives with your livestock to make sure they got to market safely. They called them drovers. And my grandfather was one of the ones that was sent on the train. He said he would get on there, they'd load the sheep onto the double-deck cars, they'd go down the tracks, and when the train stopped, it was his job to get off the caboose with a big stick and go along the train and poke the sheep and make sure they were all standing up so they weren't crushing each other. He said he was in Fort Robinson, Nebraska. He's going along, and all of a sudden the whistle blows and the train takes off. He barely caught the caboose as it went by and swung up on. But he said those trips were a lot of fun. You'd go to market and then you'd come back. And on one of the return trips, an engineer took a kindness to him and said, "Hey, you want to ride in the cab?" My grandpa was always fascinated with trains, but he told me, I got up in that cab and I wanted to get off. He said, I have never been on something that felt like it was going to tip over every 2 seconds than that steam locomotive running down the tracks with those rods flying and the clanking and the heat and the shaking. He said, I have never been on something that felt like it was going to tip over every 2 seconds than that steam locomotive running down the tracks with those rods flying and the clanking and the heat and the shaking. I'm a steam locomotive engineer. I love it. My mother does not. The very first time I ran a steam locomotive, I was doing a program through the museum and she was with me. And she's clinging to dear life in the gangway of the locomotive. And she's pale and she's swaying and she's sweating. And she turns to the engineer that was in charge of training me and she says, how fast is he taking this frickin' thing? The engineer looks up, he goes, 8 miles an hour. Speed demon right here. To take care of the trains, you had to have a large shop force. Steam locomotives are incredible machines. Who here has seen a steam locomotive fired up close? Very few of you. If you get the chance, go experience it.
Oh, yeah.
If you can go watch the big boy roll down the tracks,
Oh, yeah.
if you can go over to Hill City and ride their train, get close to that locomotive, as close to the leg, and just listen to it. They are the closest things that humans have come to making living, breathing machines. They are finicky. They're difficult. When they want to run, they'll run. When they don't want to run, they're done. And you will fight them every step of the way down the tracks. They breathe. The weather influences them on how they steam and how they function. Railroad men love their steam locomotives. Railroad management does not. Steam locomotives were incredibly labor intensive. So the locomotives that I run, we take them out on excursion trains. For every hour that I'm at the throttle of that locomotive is 3 to 4 hours of time in the shop fixing it.
Wow.
So if you take a 12-hour day, multiply that by 3, there's your maintenance time. That's for 1 day. They're incredibly labor intensive. They're also very expensive. The coal costs money. The water treatment costs money. The oil to keep them lubricated costs money. My railroad in Nevada in 1 year spent the equivalent of $60,000 a year just in lubricating oil to oil the parts. That's a lot of money. And so railroads really looked for ways to cut some costs on those things, and that's really why the steam locomotive dies. When they had them in the roundhouses, it's not a simple thing. It takes all sorts of crafts. You have a steam locomotive, you need boilermakers, you need welders, you need blacksmiths, you need carpenters, you need pipe fitters, you need electricians for the electrical work on them. They do have electricity. All of that comes together to start to form a base. But now each one of those crafts has people under them. So if you are a machinist, I didn't even mention the machinist, there's one of the big ones. The machinist had machinist helpers and machinist apprentices, and then engine wipers, which are young kids that are going after and cleaning everything up. You had hostlers making them ready to go. For one of my locomotives, to get the thing ready to roll out the door in the morning if it's cold, is a 6 to 8 hour process from start to finish just to roll out the door. That's not even to work for the day. That's just to get going. They're incredibly labor intensive. What that creates, though, is something very unique. It creates a city within a city. The railroad workers live in a company town on the edge of Casper. They're congregating together. Their children are growing up together. They're falling in love. They're having more children. Those children grow up with the railroad. They become railroaders themselves, and it creates a community that just builds on itself. That is something that we don't really see these days, especially in modern railroading. There's no railroad community like there was back in the early 1900s. This is a really cool photo. This is 1918. This is World War I. The shop workers are out here. They're showing their patriotism. They've pulled a locomotive out, and these are all the ones that are still in Casper working. And what's amazing about the photo, and I don't know if you can tell, the projector may not let us here, but these two right here Does anything look funny about those two?
They're women.
They're women working in the shops as early as World War I.
He know that.
You don't want to know. And so this is part of that community. Railroaders were exempt from a lot of the military drafts. Railroading was how you got men and materials across the United States to port to go to war. And so in a lot of cases, the railroaders were completely exempt from drafts, but so many of them wanted to go. And so a lot of railroaders, or a lot of railroad companies would give their workers a choice. You can be exempt from the draft and stay here, or you can go. A lot of companies would say, your job will be here when you get back. You can come back here. Go serve the country, then come back. But we're going to have to fill your spot. And railroaders, as early as World War I, are hiring women into the shop forces to keep things rolling. Tom Cole worked in the master mechanic's office, which is right there. This is the late 1930s. They had the latest and greatest technology of the time. They had Burroughs adding machines. They had the nice typewriters. They had fans to circulate the air. They had water coolers. Quite a luxury, right?
Yeah.
Back then. One of the adding machines that sat on his desk, Tom Cole's son had, and he was showing it to me and stuff, and I go, that's really cool. His son Phil unfortunately passed away in the middle of a project that I was doing, and his nephew inherited the estate, and I got a hold of the nephew and I said, hey, is there any way that part of this can go to the museum or something? I don't know, I just don't want to see it go to the dump. And he calls me and he says, hey, you want to just take it all? And so I took it all home and I sorted through it. The museum got a big portion of it, but the Burroughs adding machine from the roundhouse is on my desk at home.
Oh, wow.
I use it for railroad work as I'm doing my grants and everything. Over there on the left is the engineman's train board. So if you were a member of the train crew in the 1940s, you probably didn't have a telephone at home. So how do you know when to go to work?
The board.
You put it up on the board.
It's on the board, but you're not at work.
You better go down and check the board out.
Nope. We're going to get you covered.
I don't know.
We're going to hire what's called a call boy. So a call boy is a young boy who goes down to the roundhouse, goes to the board, he has a log book, he writes down what the trains are and who the crews are, and then it's his job to know where you live and go around and knock on your door and call you for service.
Wow.
A lot of them were told, you better find these guys at home. Do not be getting them from the bar. That was a big no-no in railroading. Tom Cole got his start as a call boy. That's how his introduction to railroading was. So he would go down to this board, get the crews, and take that around town. We have his call book, which is kind of a unique thing to have. Come World War II, a lot more of the men were called into service, and so 6 women were hired into the shop. This is the only known photo of women working in the roundhouse in central Wyoming that we have. And I've got all their names tied with the photograph. Tom Cole took this one as well. Steam locomotives, like I said, they weren't going to last. They are beautiful, they're majestic, they're fun to run, they're a pain in the ass. So railroads found a way to get out of it, and they found that through the internal combustion engine. And so in Casper, the last regular steam engine out of Casper is this one right here on December 16th, 1953. And then what Chuck calls the infernal combustion engines come in and take over. The diesel engines are not straight diesel. So the BNSF engines that you see rolling through town are not like a truck. They have a large prime mover in there, diesel engine, that powers a generator. The generator creates electricity. The electricity is sent down to the axles to traction motors, which actually power the trains. So they're technically diesel electric locomotives. That's what replaces the steam locomotive. How many of you can drive a car? I didn't say well. How many of you know how to drive a car? If you know how to drive a car, in very short order, I can teach you how to run a diesel locomotive. Steam locomotives take years to master. You worked for years up through the ranks as a brakeman, and then a fireman, and then a student engineer, and then finally an engineer, and then they put you on switch runs, and you had to earn your way up to become a passenger engineer. That took years. Diesel locomotives, I can pull somebody off the street, train them in a month, and I can send them on their way. That is a huge cost savings for the railroads. So there we've talked about all the good. Of course, with the good, you're going to have the bad days.
Oh,
Here's the worst. Has anybody heard of the Coal Creek train wreck? Ah, well, let me enlighten you. I wrote the book. The Coal Creek train wreck is Wyoming's worst passenger rail disaster ever. You would think the Union Pacific had a worse wreck? Nope, it happened just between Casper and Glen Rock. The overnight passenger train number 30 for the Burlington left town on September 27th, 1923 at 8:30 at night. There had been heavy rain. All the creeks are flooded with water. The roads are flooded. Salt Creek oil field is under 2 to 3 feet of water. You can't get from there. Casper Creek to the north of town is 100 feet wide. It is a massive storm. It's snowing. It's raining. A lot of people are going to be leaving town, and they're going to leave on the overnight passenger train to Denver. They go down to the Burlington Depot. They get on board. 66 people end up getting on the train. They have a track crew that goes out a couple hours before. They check the line. The section worker checks underneath all the bridges. He doesn't find anything concerning. They come back to town. The dispatcher tells the conductor and engineer, "You're good to go. Just watch it. Keep an eye out for bad track." And so the engineer, who is a man named Ed Spangler, gets on. He is not the regular engineer. He's a freight engineer, but the regular engineer decided he didn't want to work that night. So he stays home. Ed gets up in the cab with a young fireman from Grable named Ollie Malone. They get their engine ready to go. Conductor Goff gets all the passengers on the train. Conductor Colburn for the Pullman Company gets everybody loaded in the Pullman cars. They leave out of Casper at 8:35 p.m. right on time. The train rolls through Casper. It rolls through newly incorporated Evansville. It gets out along the North Platte River, and they reach a steady speed of about 40 or 45 miles an hour. Ed is looking up along the tracks. Everything's good. They're going right along. About 45 minutes into the trip, most people are settling down for the night. The Pullman porters have made up the beds. People are crawling into bed. There's a lot of men in a smoking compartment, having a good time, talking to each other. A train comes around a corner, and nobody can quite say what happens, but knowing what I know from running steam locomotives, I think this is what happens. Ed looks ahead, and he should see track going across Coal Creek, which is normally dry, and he sees nothing. So the passengers report that there's 3 bumps. Bump number 1 is when he threw the brakes into emergency, so every brake along the train grips the wheels. Bump number 2, the train leaves the tracks. Bump number 3, the train flies over and crashes into Coal Creek, which is normally dry and is now at 16 feet deep.
oh dear.
Locomotive goes in first. The post office car goes in on top of that. An express car that's made of wood goes on top of that. The car behind it crashes on top of it. It splinters like matchsticks. And the expressman's stone clear over to the far bank of Coal Creek on the Glen Rock side. Then another coach comes in, smashes the smoking car. It's also made of wood. Everybody in that car except one are killed right then. And then one of the Pullman cars tips into the stream. One leaves the tracks. The other one stays upright on the tracks. This whole thing that I just explained happened like that. My book that I have on this is called Steam, Steel, and Silence, and I called it that because out of all the reports of survivors from that wreck, they talk about how quiet it was after the wreck. It was so impactful, so instantaneous that nobody had time to scream. And they're thrown into pitch black darkness. The coach is tipped up. It's in the middle of the stream. People are in that coach. They try to jump to shore. One guy makes it. A gal follows him. The bank crumbles underneath her. She goes into the river, or into Coal Creek. He jumps back in after her. They go down the North Platte River. They come out several miles below, find a sheep camp to take care of them for the night. Another guy is in a Pullman car. He's in the bathroom when it happens. Water comes in. He gets swished around the toilet like a goldfish in a bowl, sucked out down the North Platte River.
Oh.
And so I just want to let people know that there's money involved for all of us. And what we really owe you, the people, whether we're elected officials, whether we own a media company that accepts donations. Let's face it, I mean, advertising dollars, when it used to be advertising dollars that drove local media, those people, I mean, I've had a lot of advertisers pull their money from the Newsletter Journal and I knew they were gonna, because editorials I wrote. I mean, God, when I went after the Fair Board, I lost advertising right and left over that. I lost advertising over the hospital board thing a few years ago. Every time we write an editorial challenging something in Weston County, we stand the chance to lose dollars. And so now taking in donations really doesn't make it any difference.
Another guy is in a Pullman car. He's in the bathroom when it happens. Water comes in. He gets swished around the toilet like a goldfish in a bowl, sucked out down the North Platte River. They had some characters on this train, some interesting folks. A lot of salesmen, but they also had who was an up-and-coming B.B. Brooks. His name was Charles Gunther. Has anybody heard of Charles Gunther of Douglas? Nobody has. He was up-and-coming in Wyoming politics. He was being tutored by B.B. Brooks. He was a member of the Oilmen's Society. He was a state representative. He was going to be governor of Wyoming. He's killed in the wreck and is virtually forgotten. Another guy is a man named Doc Chipley. He's a narcotics agent with the federal government. He is on the train taking evidence back to Cheyenne to convict the narcotics gangs in Casper. A guy named Fred Fargo follows him onto the train to rob or kill him. Fred is killed. Doc Chipley survives.
Wow.
There's also a young African American on the train. He was a Chicago Northwestern employee. He was going home to Kansas City. He's killed in the wreck. And so you have all of this mix of humanity in there. Yes, ma'am.
Was it done by the guy that was head of the train, or was there anything that he could have done to prevent it?
No.
So the train did it, not the guy running the train.
The track was gone,
Oh.
and he couldn't stop. Trains take a long time to stop. And so as he comes around that corner, he does everything he can. He throws the brakes into emergency. There's wet rail. So wet steel rail with wet steel tires. They slide right into it. Nothing they could have gone. They do a major investigation. The ICC does one. The Converse County Coroner does one, and the railroad does an investigation. All three independent investigations come up with the same conclusion. This was an unavoidable act of God. There was nothing that could have been done with everything available to make this right.
Did he die also?
Yeah. The engineer, the firemen both died. The conductor died. Out of the 66 passengers, 31 of them are killed. And of the crew, 10 of the crew members are killed. Oh. And they leave, the Pullman conductor survived, one of the brakemen, and one of the porters to take care of the passengers. The passengers basically had to save themselves. You can see in these pictures, these are the wreck. All of those people in that top one in the background are not there to help. When you have an accident, who's the first group to get there?
Looky-loos.
The looky-loos. So those are all looky-loos that drove from Casper to see the wreck.
Oh my gosh.
Then you have the newspaper people. The newspaper people are in the end of the passenger car, click-clacking away on typewriters while the rescuers are pulling bodies out of the other end. Sorry, not to down your craft.
I understand.
Photographers show up, and then who else shows up at a disaster scene? Nobody wants to. The blood-sucking lawyers get there, and they try to file lawsuits against the railroad. They start stealing pieces of the train and parts of the bridge to try to prove the railroad did something wrong.
Oh my God.
They get a hold of some of their survivors, and they start talking them up in the bar. Oh, I think you got thrown 13 feet through the air, didn't you? Oh, didn't you have the Hope Diamond in your baggage? I think we could get a claim for that. Those are all part of this massive story. I have a whole nother program just on the Coal Creek train wreck. I do a 1.5-day Ollie class at Casper College on the Coal Creek train wreck. It's a fascinating story. Don't have time for it all today. But that locomotive, Colorado and Southern number 350, is pulled from the stream. It's pulled back to Casper, and guess what the railroad does with it?
Fixes it?
They fix it. They take it to Denver.
Wow.
They rebuild it.
No.
Guess what train they put it on?
Same one.
The exact same train. Railroaders, all of my railroaders in the room, how superstitious are we? Railroaders are pretty darn superstitious. So you have a locomotive that killed the crew, and they're telling you to go run it on the same track that killed the crew, on the same passenger train. Can only imagine what some of those conversations were like. Ollie Malone, just another little side note, his son is one of the original Little Rascals. So there's all these little ties in here that make this such an interesting story. These are the passenger cars. When they pulled them back to Casper, that's the inside of the Pullman car where people had to save themselves. This is after they took out all of the bedding, the mattresses, the curtains, the ladders, the luggage, everything that had fallen in that they were trying to get themselves out of. Really, really a mess. Fascinating story. I can do that talk in the future if you want to hear more about it. There were other wrecks too. That top one is June 1985. That was at a place called Sodium, which is out towards Powder River. The train was going 50 miles an hour when a wheel exploded. And the car came off. One of the cars was entirely packed full of potatoes, and it broke open. And Chuck said when they went to clean that up, the potatoes in the hot sun, after a couple of days, made for a really pleasant place to work. Down there on the bottom is a wreck that happened in Evansville in 1923. 1923, not a great year.
No.
This was in October. The engineer was A.T. Patrick. He derailed the train right in Evansville, caused a huge amount of damage. They took him out of service, and what they've done is they've built what's called a shoe fly. A shoe fly is temporary track around the wreck so they could clean it up. They did that with the Coal Creek wreck too. They built a temporary bridge. So if you were coming in on the passenger train, you could look down on them cleaning up the same train that they're cleaning up while you're riding it. It's okay. Now, what is Casper known for? Oil. Casper is the oil capital of the Rockies. In the 1920s, Casper was shipping more oil by rail than any other city in the world. That was quite the achievement for Casper. To do that, we had about 6 or 7 refineries at any given time in Casper's history, the largest of which was the Standard Oil Company refinery. That's it down at the bottom. They also had a tank car repair place. People talked about growing up in Casper and hearing the riveting on those empty tank cars. Imagine that when you're trying to sleep. Trains were coming in and out, loaded up with oil, shipping it in, shipping it out. As such, all of the locomotives in the Casper division were powered by oil. But we also had another railroad, the North and South. The North and South ran from just north of Casper out to the Salt Creek oil field and back. Little mom and pop operation. Really, think Hooterville Cannonball when you're thinking about the North and South. These are the only 2 known pictures that I have of it. They had big dreams too. They were going to build a line all the way up to Montana. They got as far as Salt Creek. That was it, Midwest. They built this after they had built pipelines. So your main commodity, they really didn't need. Right here is the Burlington ball field. There's the roundhouse down there at the bottom. The railroad built a ball field behind the roundhouse for the employees. There were 4 teams in town. Northwestern had a team, Burlington had a team, the Standard Oil Refinery had a team, and the Salt Creek Oil Field had a team. They would come down, play ball games. The grandstands weren't big enough, so they all parked their cars all the way around it. You can only imagine how many windshields they got. Again, this is Chuck up on the top of the power plant smokestack. This is Natrona. This is a very rarely seen photo album from out there. Probably not a place I'd want to be. When I showed Mom this picture inside the store with all these grubby children, she said, "I can smell that. It doesn't smell good." Passenger service really starts to fall out in the 30s. They try some different things. The Northwestern in particular couldn't make money on the passenger trains, so they brought in what's called a doodle bug, or a rail motor car. These were little self-prepared rail cars that had a baggage section, a mail section, and coach section. Basically a bus on rail wheels. And they would take you back and forth to try to save the route. This is up in Thermopolis. They got to Thermopolis in 1910, then worked through the Wind River Canyon. That picture right there is the only known photo taken from inside a steam locomotive in the Wind River Canyon. That was in that stuff that Tom's nephew gave me. The railroad goes through in 1910, 1911, then they get to Casper, on the way to Casper in 1912. How many of us have driven that road through the canyon? One of my favorite drives in the state.
Yes.
That road wasn't constructed until 14 years after the railroad had gone through. So for 14 years, you didn't have the road on the other side. This is Lovell in the 1960s. This is one of the only pictures of them loading mail into the mail car. That's one of the only photos inside the passenger train. Special events, we had a lot of those in Central Wyoming. One of the biggest was the 50th anniversary of the arrival of the train to Casper. It's a golden anniversary, so what do? Paint it gold. One of the worst paint schemes I've ever seen on a locomotive. It's horrible. Getting there, they take the locomotive up through Douglas, and the engineer behind the throttle is trying to show off as he's going through Douglas, so he's popping the throttle, going through town about 40 miles an hour. Doesn't realize the switch is lined for the passenger train parked at the depot. Slams into the back of the passenger train. They're supposed to run this the next day. They rush mechanics up from Lyons, Nebraska. Chuck is a teenager, that's him in the cab, goes down there with his knowledge from his poking around the Union Pacific shops as a teenager and lends a hand. They fix the locomotive overnight and run it the next day. The public had no clue. They had to rush that headlight all the way from Alliance, Nebraska to get it there in time. They paint it gold, but they don't want to leave it gold. It has to be black again. So they use water-soluble gold paint on a steam locomotive. With the weather forecast calling for rain. It's fine. It's fine.
Was anybody killed?
Nope. Nope. Nobody even got hurt in that one, really. There were just bumps and bruises, but yeah. Up top, there's the Queen of Romania in the fur coat, right next to Nellie Taylor Ross, Wyoming's female governor. The Queen of Romania visited Casper in 1926. She was making a cross-country tour. This was kind of a big thing. Down on the bottom is Truman when he visited in 1950. That rail car is called the Ferdinand Magellan. It's the only rail car in modern history built to carry the president. Completely armor-plated, bulletproof glass, everything. It's at a railroad museum in Florida now. And then there is Teddy Roosevelt after he'd come up from Cheyenne and rode in the Cheyenne Frontier Days parade with B.B. Brooks. The Queen's train, this is Tom again. He climbed to the top of the smokestack. The train is going across the bridge in the left photo. And then there on the right is the crowd to greet the Queen as she's getting off the train. Tom's a show-off. As the Queen's getting off the train, guess what he does?
Handstand.
Handstand on the top of the smokestack. He got fired for 2 weeks. Another special visitor we had was the Pioneer Zephyr. This was the United States' first streamlined diesel passenger train. Made a cross-country tour. This train is now in the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry. This is 1934. That was a very big event in Casper, as you can see from the crowds down there. Of course, every child hoped for the circus to come to town. Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey had the longest private passenger train in the world before they stopped their operations a few years ago. They came to Casper several times. Here they are unloading an elephant. They also had a mishap. They were going from Casper up to Montana. They're going through Lovell, and the track splits underneath the train, and the circus train goes on the ground. Nobody's hurt, no animals are hurt, but the newspapers reported it as the greatest show in Lovell. Probably the only show in Lovell. I don't know. Those aren't the only special passenger train or special trains to operate. One of my earliest memories, right here. We were in kindergarten, and they called us out. They took us out behind the school, and Burlington Northern brought Santa Claus through town, and Santa got off the train right here behind this school. One of those things that got my love of trains going. This is the end. We're almost done here. There's the last remnant of the Casper Roundhouse. They had torn down almost all of it. This is the end. This is the mid-1980s. There's not even a newspaper article about them tearing it down.
Why?
Yep.
I mean, why did they get rid of it?
Didn't need it. No steam locomotives, diesels, you don't need a shop like that. The
Nope.
shops all got consolidated. So all of the mechanics went to Alliance, Nebraska. If a steam locomotive breaks on the line, you probably can't move it very far. If a diesel has a motor failure, you just turn it off and pull it in the middle of a train. So their big repair facilities got consolidated. Denver has a big one. Alliance, Nebraska had a big one. You don't need things like this anymore. With the loss of the roundhouses and the servicing facilities, you lost the community.
Yep.
All of those railroad families pick up and leave. They go to other trades. That tradition of being a railroad family starts to die. And modern railroading, I'm sorry, is not railroading. It's not what it was. It is not that family thing. There's not that pride in it. And so that was a huge loss.
Doesn't Evanston still have a roundhouse?
They do. They do. It was donated to the town and now it's a convention center. So they saved that. And Cheyenne still has theirs. They still use it to house equipment. There's that Northwestern depot, once the finest depot on the entire Chicago Northwestern, torn down in the 1980s to make way for a parking lot. There's that Northwestern depot, once the finest depot on the entire Chicago Northwestern, torn down in the 1980s to make way for a parking lot.
No kidding.
You can thank some prominent Casper folks that I could give you names of because I shame them in my book that's coming out. This is one of the biggest travesties in Casper. We lost the Northwestern Depot, we lost the old armory, we lost our Carnegie Library, we lost our classic courthouse. Casper has a lot of failures in terms of historic preservation. This is the one that made people mad. The community wanted to save it, so they came in overnight and started blowing holes in the wall until they couldn't save it.
No kidding.
For you guys up in this region, what is this part of Wyoming known for?
Coal.
Coal. This is 1979. I believe this one is Caballo? Or Cordero? Or Cordero. I can't remember. I used to inspect this mine and now I can't remember it. For your part of the state, your big claim to fame is the Powder River Basin subdivision. That is the most expensive, most advanced section of mainline railroad track in the United States.
Yeah.
It is one of the busiest sections of railroad track in the United States. When I was in the coal program for Department of the Interior, we were doing something like 436 million tons of coal a year out of the Powder River Basin in those coal trains. They're now 1.5 miles plus. They are ginormous. They're so big, if you drive past Black Thunder and you see that loadout on Highlight Road, they have that thing full and they continue to fill it as the coal train goes underneath it because there's not enough capacity in those silos to fill one train. There's a lot of coal coming out of Wyoming. And that has been really a driving force for especially Campbell County and Converse County for decades since that all took off. So this last photo here is just one of my favorites. If you've been on 2nd Street in Casper, you go past Veterans Park. The Chicago Northwestern used to run right through Veterans Park. And the Chicago Northwestern gave the land for that, and it was actually Casper's first arboretum. They brought in all sorts of trees from all over the country to figure out what would grow in Casper. City of Casper wanted to move Veterans Park, and they didn't think that this was quite as special as it is, and we did all the research, and the Veterans Group got them to keep their park there. So, a little bit of a yay. So, with that kind of wraps up 130 some years of Central Wyoming railroading. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but otherwise, thank you for coming. I did not bring any books today. They're sitting at home on my kitchen table. So I have done a few books. I have Images of Rails, Central Wyoming Railroading. That's from Arcadia Publishing. I also have Steam, Still, and Silence about the Coal Creek train wreck. This summer I have a new one coming out, Steam Railroads of Central Wyoming, which have a lot of these never before seen pictures. I also write kids' cat books. about our world famous shot cap at the railroad that I work at named Dirt. So
Well, the railroad up here went to Seattle,
yeah,
so that's a whole other story.
yeah. And I was gonna have part of that, but I've been busy the last few months. So like I told Cindy, I've got projects that I'm working on here. I'm trying to track down some of our Cambria history, some of the mining history, some of that railroading connections. So there'll be a future
The railroad came
program.
here because of Cambria.
Mhm.
We'll come back for sure.
I'll think about it.
You have a museum in Casper?
We have several. I'm involved with Fort Casper Museum. We're the Central Wyoming History Museum.
Okay,
That's a nice museum.
Thank you.
That's where the Ford
Yeah.
Event Center is?
We're
Inside
down
there?
below on the river. So you have the Trail Center up by the Event Center, and then down at the actual river crossing is Fort Casper.
Do you have an event where you talk? You're such a good talker.
I do a lot of talking. I've been with and involved with 13 different museums and historic centers in 3 different states. This is just what I do. I present for museum associations, historic societies. Sometimes without even being asked, I just go, hey, can I talk? And they usually let me, so.
Do you have a schedule or anything?
Not really, it's just as it comes up.
Oh.
You can catch me on YouTube if you want to learn about the Nevada Northern. Look up the Nevada Northern Railway. I've got a new YouTube series with my boss called Down the Rabbit Hole, where we dive into railroading history.
Down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
The South Dakota legislature is dealing with a bill about passenger trains coming to South Dakota because, as Wyoming, there is none.
Yep.
Is there, this is not really, it's a political question, not a railroad question, but you think there's a possibility of passenger rail?
Amtrak kind of goes in and out, depending on the political winds. South Dakota and Wyoming are the 2 states without passenger rail service. We're the only 2. Central or Southern Wyoming had an Amtrak train up until, I can't remember when, the early 90s, I think, when it fell away. The biggest talk that has been happening in the last few years is a passenger connection from Denver to Billings, which would take it through Casper. If you look at Amtrak, one of Amtrak's biggest failures is that back east it's great. There's all sorts of connections you can make. In the west, if I want to go from Denver to anywhere else, I have to go to Chicago or I have to go to California and then travel up and down to get to a different train.
Right.
So if they had a north-south in Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, it would make that a lot more palatable, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. And so I don't know if it's going to happen, but that's been a big talk. The other thing is Denver's light rail and their commuter rail service keeps creeping closer and closer to Cheyenne. And so they keep talking about Cheyenne's going to be connected to Denver's commuter rail service, which I would love, because then you just drive to Cheyenne, hop on a train, and you don't have to drive in Denver, which I hate doing. Yeah. So.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
I've got a question. Like those steam locomotives, how much water do they hold?
That's a good question. How much water do the steam locomotives hold? It's not an easy question to answer because it depends on the locomotive. So my locomotives are 280 consolidations. My biggest one weighs 93.5 tons, and it has 7,500 gallons of water in the tender. If you get to things like the big boy, you're talking, I think, 40,000 gallons. Very, very big. Water is the limiting factor for steam locomotives. All these towns in Wyoming spaced 20 to 40 miles apart. Those were water stops. Not fuel, water. You go through a lot of water. That 7,500 gallons, I will burn through in about 14 miles.
Whoa.
Going up and down the hill with a heavy train.
And when did they switch? The first steam locomotives, they burned wood, right?
Yep.
When did they switch to coal?
So fuel in steam locomotives, that's another hard one to answer because it was very dependent on where you were.
Yeah.
So they start with wood, obviously that's an easy fuel source, but very early on, coal burning regions switched to coal. And in back east, you're using anthracite, out here you're using bituminous, sub-bituminous stuff. If you had oil, you went from wood to oil. You didn't even go to coal. It was what was the cheapest fuel that you had. And even up until the end of steam operations, there were short line railroads burning wood right to the end, because that's what they did. That's what they had. Yeah.
It would have been before your time, but when I went to kindergarten in this school, the kindergarten kids got to ride in the caboose from here to Osage. We got graham crackers and little cartons of milk, so it was a big deal.
Oh, see, that was cooler than ours, Becky. We just got to sit in the playground in the cold.
And then the sixth grade, and that would have been 1960 or something, the sixth grade got on the passenger train from here to Denver. We got on in the evening and we got off in the morning in Denver. That was our sixth grade.
Things you guys got that I didn't get. It's born in the wrong time period is what I say. So.
I remember sitting at the railroad crossing here on Main Street in the car with my family, and we had to sit there and wait for a train to go by, and it was, I guess it was a steam engine. It was a great chugga,
Yep.
and that steam came out the top. But I remember sitting there watching the train go by, and it must have been early 50s.
Yeah, that would have been steam then. Yeah.
I know this is more southern Wyoming, but have you ever been on or even had the privilege of running the big boy?
I've never been on it, unfortunately. I did watch it leave Cheyenne the first time. I figured, I'm a Wyoming boy, I'm a steam guy, I'm gonna go. Unfortunately for me, there's a group of people that have kind of stolen some of my railroading love, and we call them foamers.
Uh-huh.
They're people that foam at the mouth when they see a locomotive go by. And I go to Cheyenne to see the big boy leave the first time. We're the very first ones there. The few of us are all lined up. We're a respectful distance back. We're all along the fence. And right before it comes, all these people come right in front of us. And they're like on the tracks. And UP is trying to get them off the tracks so the train can go by. And then I was stuck there for an hour and a half. Because these guys clogged up the roads, and they're running red lights, and they're doing all this stuff. And I watched the Cheyenne police just make circles. They had to make thousands of dollars in tickets that day. So I haven't been up close to it since. However, the railroad I work for in Nevada has 2 interchanges with the Union Pacific. One of them is still active, and the big boy is coming through April 4th, and they're going to stop at our interchange, and so I'm going to go down and see it there.
And being in Nevada, you're really not that big of a drive to Old Sacramento. You have got to go and get on.
I know.
I've been in the cab forward there, which is amazing.
One of these days I'll get there.
Okay.
It's on my list.
All right.
So it goes, big boy goes through Cheyenne?
So the big boy, if you've never heard of UP's STEAM program, this is one of Wyoming's coolest things. Wyoming has 2 steam locomotives still owned by Union Pacific. The 844 is the last mainline steam locomotive in the United States that has never been retired. UP never retired it. They kept it for special service. She still runs today. The second one is 4014, the big boy. She is the largest operating steam locomotive in the world.
Wow.
And she's housed in Cheyenne.
And she is massive.
Massive. A 4884.
Yeah.
So 4 leading wheels, 8 driving wheels, another set of 8 driving wheels, and another 4 trailing wheels.
Yeah.
That is Wyoming's big thing. We have active mainline steam on a Class 1 railroad in Wyoming. That locomotive is making a America 250 coast-to-coast tour. She's going to the West Coast in April, then she's going to go all the way across to the East Coast and back. It'll be the first time that locomotive has ever gone cross-country.
Wow.
How does the horsepower compare, big boy, to one of the engines we see go through town?
I'm not going to be able to tell you off the top of my head. We don't rate horsepower on steam locomotives. We rate tractive effort. But that locomotive is extremely, extremely powerful.
It's more?
It's more than a single one of these.
Okay.
What these diesel locomotives allowed them to do is, by themselves, they are not as powerful as the most powerful steam locomotives, but you can hook them together.
Yeah.
So if you have a big train, you calculate what effort you need. I need 5 diesel locomotives. Hook them together, plug them in together, one engineer controls all 5.
Yep.
Wow.
The big boy was built to take the Sherman Hill in Wyoming and over into Utah. She was built to be a powerhouse. And it took several diesel locomotives to replace that one steam locomotive. Incredibly powerful piece of machinery.
Do you have to watch the tracks real closely? Is it that heavy? It's heavy.
You got to watch. Yeah, they're doing surveys along the main lines right now, checking bridge ratings, checking everything to make sure it doesn't come off the track.
That
Yeah,
would be horrible.
yeah.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
One of my best friends in college, his dad was the engineer for Bigwood.
Oh, yeah.
And he took it from Rollins over the hill to Cheyenne.
Oh,
That's something I
cool.
wish I could have seen. I mean, today they run a passenger train with it. They got a diesel pusher on it. She doesn't do what she used to do. Hearing that machine actually pull massive tonnage over a grade like that would just be incredible. But probably won't see it.
A lot of smoke.
Yeah.
One of my fondest memories is remembering my grandparents coming from Montana to Newcastle to
Yeah.
visit in like 1948, 1949.
Yeah.
It was really a
When we
joy.
lost passenger service, and then when we lost steam locomotives, the general public lost a lot of their connections with the railroad. And a lot of those fond memories, kids from my era don't have that.
That's right.
We just don't. It's something that annoys us when we get stopped at the Main Street crossing. We don't see what it is. I say we, I'm not one of them.
Do you like to have more information about your great-great-grandfather and grandmother?
Of course.
Have you ever read my book?
I've got it on my table. It's next in my list.
Oh, it's on the Grace McDonald, the lawyer.
Yep.
Yeah, because she was a good friend of theirs.
Yep.
And I thought maybe that was a part of their story you hadn't read.
Yeah, it wasn't. So they sent me a copy for my last talk, and it's next on my pile of books. I'm getting there.
Rita, my physical therapist, told me he read the first 4 chapters, and it wasn't nearly as boring as he thought.
That's what people said about my books. Well, thank you very much. I'll hang out for a few before I got to hit the road.
Thank you.
I'll be back.